chapter 2, we stopped before we finished because I thought the next 3 little parts went together. So we got through the paralytic. So chapter 2, we read through verse 12. Yes. And then we have 3 different scenes to wrap up the chapter. And what's, if you recall, one of the marks of John's gospel is he puts things in a certain, he's very tight. It's a brief, concise book, but quite deliberate for all that. You can't actually be concise without being deliberate. And you can see that and we'll see it more as we go on. Because one of the things that Mark does throughout the book is this like sandwich method, where he'll give you something, then he'll tell some story, and then he'll kind of give another part, like another slice of bread that sort of matches the other one. Both of these help you understand what comes in between. So there's a craft to it. That's part of why last week I said one of the, I think, most important, at least for me, one of the things that has been most helpful in understanding anything I read is I think, all right, let it tell me what it wants to tell me. What's it presenting me? I don't tell it what it should tell me, what I think it's telling me. I let it present itself. Sometimes that means I'm left with questions. And that is okay, because there's some things we're never going to understand. And there are other things that are explained in other parts of the Bible. And when we read those, we go, oh, that must be how I should have understood that. But it's okay to sit with not knowing. And I say that because what you need to know for Mark's purposes, he tells you. And that's why you just say, all right, I don't know what he meant by that, but I don't need to right now let me just focus on what is he telling me. So that's the kind of the spirit in which I approach all my reading. It wasn't something that, it took me a long time to learn that. And when I did, I felt it revolutionized the way I read it. It enabled me to read more closely, to pay attention to things like a sandwich. Oh, wait a minute, isn't this a funny thing? And he does it again and again. So you start to notice, and we've already noticed how the wilderness comes up as a place of both retreat in a good way or temptation in a bad way. But either way, you are isolated. And Mark's favorite word, immediately. I mean, it's absurd sometimes. I think, why immediately on that? So anyway, look for those things as we read through this.
Do you have an answer to that? Why?
I think the idea, I don't know, but I think it's to keep you moving. You're not to slow down in terms of the action continues. Immediately this happened. And it fits with his whole approach. Remember, he doesn't, if you notice, he's not giving us, he's only showing us what went on. He doesn't, what's the word? Well, he doesn't explain it. He doesn't give you the behind the scenes look. He doesn't, yeah, or there's a word I can't find. Anyway, no, it's like almost like a newscaster who like explains everything, but it's eluding me. So the focus for Mark isn't on sort of the side conversation. It's the action. What happens next? What happens? And so I think that's at least one answer I could give. The idea is we're going to keep moving. Immediately this happened, then this happened. And it may as much have been a trigger for him or help him focus on keep going, action. What happened next? So that's my guess.
I always thought it was the power of God all this time.
What?
Immediately. So God did this. Like he's like highlighting this spectacular thing. Immediately we did this.
Well, I think in some
God,
cases he
power.
is.
Like this wouldn't have happened, but because of Jesus and all that, bam, God's moving in this way and God's moving in that way.
In some cases that fits.
But not all. Okay.
No, if it says and immediately he had breakfast.
That's not.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not feeling much of the Holy Spirit as a movement. Yeah.
Like that.
Right. And again, and that may be the answer if you notice every case. does seem to be pointing to some initiation of a grand event.
Something.
But let the
spectacular.
context to tell you what it means as much as possible. And that's the only way I can answer Penelope's question is I don't know. I don't know. Mark and I haven't met yet,
I'm
except,
always trying to figure out what God's doing.
well,
God doing? What is God doing?
right.
I never thought of the disciple, what he's saying. So I love that. I think that's really cool.
But this is what, yeah, because he's the one who put this together.
Right.
And, well, it's a book. That's the other thing. These are all side notes. I apologize. But I feel like sometimes I have to explain why I do what I do or the way I approach it. This is a written, insofar as this is written, we must treat it as a written work. Well, what does that mean? That means you read it and you try to understand what it says. It means it has to follow rules of grammar in the Greek and then in this translation. Why? Because that's how you communicate meaning. You can't just start saying random words and assume they'll communicate. So it has to be in a structure. Well, if it's in a structure, then we have to read it with the diligence and sort of the rules and discipline we use to read any work. And you can, at least for now, take my word for it. This is high literature. It withstands the kind of scrutiny that college professors give to Shakespeare or to Milton or to, the grand poets. So that's what I try to do. All right, if this is good literature, then it could hear our questions. It could take our scrutiny. Why did he use that phrase? If I feel, there are times I think it's an odd phrase and I will check it against the Greek to see if that's how I would have translated it. But either way, you have it here and the Holy Spirit can work through this as well. So listen to something that's strange and it's okay to wonder. In fact, it's encouraged. What does that mean? Why did he say it that way? And those are you think about like climbing a rock wall, those are the little crevices you can get your fingers into and keep moving up. Those things that are strange or slow you down or trip you up. Or beautiful. There's sometimes I just think, what a great phrase that is.
Well, you read different translations too, right? Of the same phrase.
You can, they vary. The one that we had in those, I mean, each has its own quirks. I do like the ESV. I find it very close. This is the one we're in that little booklet. It's the English Standard Version. It's fairly new. I don't think it's been around more than 20 years. And I like it because it stays. So my rule, but this is just for me because I'm weird, is if I can sort of figure out what the Greek or the Hebrew is behind an English translation, I like it. Then it means it's staying pretty close to it. Whereas some are just rephrasing everything to make it understood. And there's a use for that as well. But these are done by humans who also have biases that sometimes creep into how they translate certain things. This is not without those as well. Don't think they affect Mark, but there are other places where it's noticeable and frankly a little frustrating. But that doesn't take away from what else it gives us. So I think it's a fine version. But also there are versions that are designed to be much easier to understand. The New Living Translation, for example, is one of them. And in fact, that one was originally inspired by, so
I didn't like that version for some reason. Did you? I don't know.
Well, I mean, it doesn't work for me because my head's always going, but wait a minute, but that's me. I know that's a weird thing. So
No,
I don't expect.
We have different versions because not everybody can read a version.
Yeah.
Understand it.
And people, the reason you have different versions is people always think there's a better way. I could go through and tell you, I think this would be a better translation.
Yeah.
It never ends.
Yeah.
But I work for Hendrickson Publishers. The parent company is a company called Tyndale House Publishers. Tyndale was started by a man named something Taylor. I don't remember his first name. And he started rewriting the Bible, so that he could read it to his kids. So he tried he did it English to English, but he tried to make it make sense to them. And then that was sort of inspired what came out in the 70s as, what was it? We had those Bibles, Mom. I can't remember the name. The Way. Did we have those? Anyway, very kind of conversational, just idea to idea, not word to word was the goal. And the reason I bring it up now is I know a bunch of the scholars who work on the translation committee. I personally prefer a more a stricter translation. I like it to be closer to the original, as long as it makes sense in English. But so I don't love when things are paraphrased or rearranged, or even at times words kind of. Well, it doesn't matter.
And you're not only a Bible scholar, but you have many years in the Lord. I mean, I can see the way or those
Yeah.
bringing somebody into something that they could understand a little bit
Yep.
better and maybe draw them into later,
Yeah.
other translations. Just
Yeah.
making it accessible to
Absolutely, yeah.
younger and less sophisticated or educated.
Or it's a different purpose, though. If they recognize, and again, so I have this little blurb on my computer. I don't know. I got to remember which. Traduttori, and there are two of them. Basically, translators are traders, is what it translates to. It's a Latin phrase. And meaning the minute you translate something, you put yourself into it. If there's a word that I could translate one of 5 ways, I pick one, and you don't know about the other 4. So there
That's a law
is.
of physics, isn't it? If you look at something, you change it.
That actually, and it's also a law of economics. There's a law. I mean, yes, your stuff now mixes with it. While we're getting really afield. Mark's here. But anyway.
The other day when I said, "What does borrow mean in Hebrew?" And she started speaking in Hebrew. And I was just like, I don't care if I can understand it. I'm just so happy right now.
Well, let's find out what Jesus does next in the book of Mark, shall we? Sue, would you read that first section just through verse 17, please? You get ready. No, Sue now, but you get ready, okay? Don't be falling asleep on me.
Try not to. He went out again beside the sea, and all the crowd was coming to him, and he was teaching them. And as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth, and said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. And as he reclined at table in his house, many tax collectors and sinners were reclining with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. And the scribes of the Pharisees.
Hang on a second. Mark 2, chapter 2, and we're in the middle of it. So she started in verse 12. 13. And look, Ma, do you have a page number?
14.
Page 14, Josephine.
I'm on page 8.
Well, why don't you go ahead to 14? Let's get you to 14, dear.
That's the good thing about all knowing the same thing. You can do it.
Yeah. All right. All right. And Sue is up to,
Yeah,
and Sue's kind of halfway through that section.
I'll start with 16. And the scribes of the Pharisees, when they saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" And when Jesus heard it, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners."
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to leave it wide open for the field. Anybody notice anything that you want to know more about or don't get or are curious about? I'll give you many if you don't, but I just want to see what you think. Because this is when you're on your own, this is the kind of thing you do. You ask questions.
Levi was a Jew,
Yep.
and Jewish and tax collectors didn't usually get along.
Okay, tax collecting. Let's talk about that. Who gets the taxes?
Romans.
The Romans. Are the Jews happy about this?
No.
No. What was their system? You guys remember in the Old Testament? Were they taxed?
On everything.
No. Old Testament, pre-Roman. How did they gave money, 10%, right? But that went to providing for the temple services and the Levites' well-being. So they were aware, but this was something different. Well, the rabbis were at that point the priests and the Levites, so they were the servant. They served. So that's great. Tax collecting, you go, wait a minute. I don't remember hearing about taxes. Well, trust me, they weren't really in the Old Testament. The later parts of the Old Testament, you start to see it. But for the most part, you don't have because the God's people were the political entity. It wasn't a democracy or an imperialism or imperialistic state. It was a theocracy. So God's rules were the ones that ran the place. So you go, wait a minute, it's tax collector, but Levi is, I presume, from the house of Levi, which is these are the servants who receive the tithes. They live off. They weren't even given a tribe when the Israelites came and they divided the 12 tribes into the 12 lands. Levi's tribe didn't get a land. They had an area, but they didn't own it. They didn't have the same kind of inheritance rights that the other tribes did. They lived off the generosity of the other tribes. So here we have Levi collecting taxes for the Romans. What do you suppose his reputation in the town was based on that? I don't think they would have liked him much, right? So that's good for this first section. Notice that he went again beside the sea, and all the crowd was coming to him, and he was teaching them, which is what he wants to do. Remember, we had let's go. We're here to preach. Not primarily to heal. There was the two kingdoms, and he was investing in the one while he lived in the other and still served in the other. So, and then he sees Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth and said, "Follow me." And he gets up and follows him. I'm guessing there's some money back there. I'm guessing there's some Roman who's keeping track of all this. How do you think that would have gone over?
Well, it was a bold move because,
Yeah.
because he had. You just lost your job. Yeah, you just lost a really good, wealthy
Better.
job.
Yep.
Yeah, and also might have cooked your own goose with the Romans.
Yep. It was nice to be in good standing. Remember, I don't know if you remember, I don't know if I said this. Yeah, we talked about this a couple weeks back. When you have an overlord that's a kind of a secular, not part of your religion, so the Romans, you have various ways you have to interact with them. And some of the Pharisees tried to buddy up with them. Let's be pals. We'll work together and make league with the powers. Others try to keep everything very separate. So anyway, this is, you see, and you do well, by the way. You always profit on earth and financially and physically by supporting the people in power, as long as they're in power and as long as you do their bidding. So this was...
And Barabbas, wasn't he on the other end of the spectrum? He was an agitator against the Romans.
Right, that's all we know, but yes,
Yeah.
he did not take Levi's or Matthew. This is Matthew, by the way. We're going to, I don't know, does he say it?
Levi's Matthew? No, it doesn't say it.
Yeah, Levi is Matthew in the Gospels of the 12 tribes, because there's no Levi of the 12 disciples. It's Matthew, the tax collector.
My brain doesn't even go, why? My brain goes, people, if Jesus told you to follow him, you would leave everything to follow him because Jesus is a big deal.
And the thing is that's in here
I never
too.
even thought about the rest.
But so presumably, Levi, I'll say Matthew so it begins to click for you that it's the same Matthew of the 12. Matthew had to reckon with that decision in the past. Which way do I go? Stick with my people, make league with the powers that be. And when Jesus looks at him, sees him, calls him, no longer is there a question. So you are correct in it's another layer to this
And God
issue.
had work to do in Levi's heart. He saw that Levi obviously had plans for him to
Well-
reveal the kingdom somehow.
Well-
It all worked in God's divine plan. I think Levi's heart was towards Jesus,
Well, all we know is that whatever Levi saw compelled him, whatever he heard compelled him. We don't know anything else yet.
Right.
But we do know is he got up and he was losing a lot. This is probably no more job, probably the displeasure of the people who have, been able to keep him, living large, feeling good.
He left his life for Jesus. Like what
So-
else to do?
And yet did it immediately.
Yeah.
So he rose and followed him. And now the next scene, we're at Levi's house. And it's mealtime, and many tax collectors and sinners. Now, what does that mean? Tax collectors and sinners were reclining with him. So imagine you're living at this time and you walk by the house. And you're a good Jew. You didn't give in to the Romans. You pay your taxes because you have to, but you don't like it and you're impoverished by it. And you're really upset with that traitor, Matthew, who, is taking their money, your money on the behalf of the overlords, right?
And making himself rich.
Making himself rich. So a bunch of that type are there hanging out. And then he says, and sinners.
Yeah.
So I think it might just be a generic way to say, not the kind you'd see in synagogue on Saturday. These are not the types who are the good neighbors.
But Jews.
Presumably Jews,
Yeah.
yes.
How do you know they're Jews?
I said presumably they're
Yeah.
Jews.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
Because-
thinking because we're.
Because maybe there's some Romans, I don't know. But either way, they're not the pious. They're not. And
It says notable sinners.
is that what yours says?
Yeah, so what does that mean? Notable sinners.
Meaning it was obvious they were sinners. They were the ones who had the Gumara on the side here, They're like, we all know about her.
Great, yeah, that was great.
Yeah, Gumara is the girlfriend, in case Barb, the Italian.
Gotcha.
Oh, it just was funny because
Yeah.
Josephine.
Yeah, the Gumara. Yeah, it's the the girlfriend that I'm thinking like mafia types, So y'all know the girlfriend on the side, but you don't say anything. So
Sure,
That makes
because
sense.
if you got the rich tax collectors,
Yeah.
then you have like the drug lords or whatever.
Exactly.
mafia,
they're notable in their sinning.
cool.
So and so that comes up where the scribes. So Jesus is there. His disciples are there, hanging out with the mafia and the tax collectors and the,
Brokers and
yeah.
adulterers and
So it's probably only men at the meal, but it's the ones who will need, access to those other services later. And the scribes of the Pharisees, which is odd, and I looked at the note, that's why I had to put my glasses on. I'm like, aren't they different? And it says, well, other sources say, and the Pharisees. So I didn't put any time into this. I don't know that it matters. But when they saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, said to him, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? You notice that we had tax collector sinners, then sinners and tax collectors, then tax collector sinners. I don't know if that matters. I just thought that was funny. Why does he do that?
they're judging him,
Yes,
right?
yes, there you go. Like, that's not to be done. You don't hang out with that type. It might rub off on you Now, do you
You're
remember?
known by the company you keep.
Yes, exactly. My dad told me that a lot. Uh, so, so you also need to add into it this sense of, do you remember that there was we just talked about it with the leper. The leper was couldn't be part of the community because he was unclean. So there's this sense of you keep the pure and the sacred separate from the profane and the sick or the infirm. So they have this like us and them mentality. But it's also a sense of you get dirty if you're with dirty people. So if you're hanging out with sinners,
You get defiled.
it's gonna you might catch it. But they just didn't do it. I'm not saying it was all for noble reasons. I don't think so, because frankly, I think this happens every Sunday and Wednesday and potluck around these parts all the time. I think that the church, people come in and then leave feeling judged often. And I don't think that's what the church should be doing. The church is, well, let's keep going and then it'll let Jesus say it. So why does he eat with them? Because that's not right. Don't be hanging out with those folks. And when Jesus heard it, he said to them, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. So he's the physician. They're sick. They need him. That's where he goes. Kind of simple.
And kind of interesting too, since there's nobody righteous except Jesus.
Well, and I think that, so righteous is this funny word, and depend on what's around it in the context. It generally means being right, being in right standing. And on political, external grounds, the scribes, the Pharisees were in right standing. They did all the check boxes. Their heart wasn't there, but they were in right standing. They didn't violate those rules. They stopped at every stoplight. Full stop, by the way. None of that. None of the.
Tickets if you didn't do it right.
They were fine. They were you would want Pharisees as your neighbors. The lawn would be trimmed. The kids would be behaved. They would look out for your place when you were away on vacation. They were upstanding people. So it could be, so that's part of it. Now, Jesus has other things to say about them elsewhere that reveals that it isn't the outside we care too much about. But they had the outside going. But his point is, who are we to serve? We have to help sick. The church is much more should look more like an AA meeting than a PTA meeting or, a quilting bee. It should be the place where people go to address their issues, to find healing. So, are you with us, Josephine? You ready to read the next paragraph? You feel good?
Yeah.
All right.
Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. And people came to him and said to him, why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said to them, can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is destroyed, and so are the skins. But new wine is for fresh wineskins.
Thank you. I try. I've done it in the past, and I'm I'm getting this habit back of reading daily. And I had this guide, and happened to be yesterday was Mark 1 and 2. And as I was reading, this, something occurred to me that I'd never noticed before, which I tell you always happens. So keep reading it and then read it again when it's time again and read other things because you'll see things. So he goes from this bit about being like, I came for the sick, and they're grumbling again, and Pharisees, the leaders, the righteous are grumbling. They're going to keep grumbling. We hear a lot of this, there's a lot of tension that ultimately leads to Jesus' crucifixion. He's not fitting in. He is not who they expected. And he's doing things that are, in their mind, just plain wrong. So you have that scene where he makes the point of saying, what do you mean? I'm hanging out with these guys because they're the ones who need me. Now, John, and then we have the John scene. His disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. And people came and said to him. So isn't that an interesting thing? Now, John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. So John's disciples are still part of the good guy club here. Even though John was a bit of an eccentric, wearing that crazy costume of his and crazy diet out in the desert, his disciples are still fasting, and the Pharisees. So you see how Mark very subtly links the two? Now, remember, just think about, John plays a big role for Mark, especially in the beginning. He opens the gospel. After saying this is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the first one we hear about is thank you, John. So John plays a big role, but John was the herald of what's to come. He who's coming after me is greater. And remember, we talked about Elijah was going to come before Jesus, before the Messiah. So there's a sense right here of the then and the now, the past, the future. There's a break. We're witnessing sort of a BC and an AD kind of situation. Everything is marked by, think about 9/11, before and after. It's a clear mark. Or COVID. You have this period of time when we were innocent and didn't think that would ever happen. And then, my goodness, life went crazy. This is a before and after, and Mark's reminding us that John's disciples who supported Jesus, who helped with baptism, are still fasting. They're still part of the old system, right? And then the people say, wait a minute. All right, we understand this stress with the Pharisees, but what's up with this? All right, they're the good guys. Why are they fasting, but you aren't, and your disciples aren't? And then you get this kind of weird answer. Admittedly, this is a weird answer. We have a wedding. Can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? I don't know. We're not talking about weddings, Jesus. What's up with this fast? And yet, this is his answer. Also, notice it's a question again.
Another question.
Yep. When people challenge him, he answers, okay, let's put this back to you. This is exactly what Socrates did, and through the mouth of Plato. Plato wrote down these dialogues. They're dialogues because they walked and people would pose something, and the way Socrates addressed it was, so do you think? And he would ask questions right back and force the student to think through the answers. So this is his question. Can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they can't fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they'll fast in that day. All right, what do you best guess? What's going on? What's he saying?
Well, is he saying that he's the bridegroom?
Maybe, but further, yes, he is saying that. But what's the picture itself? What's the deal? You're at a wedding feast.
It's a celebration.
It's a feast, yeah. There were times of feasting and times of fasting. They're both.
Fasting is more sorrowful and
Yeah.
reflective.
Yeah, exactly. And fasting has to do with, it's an act of penitence of some sort, or commitment. It is. It's just, what was the denial? Yeah. And feasts are the opposite of denial. It's celebrating. And yes, he is ultimately saying that, but he's now just telling a story. Hey, I'm sure they didn't miss it, but how there's plausible deniability. We're just talking about a wedding guest. If the bridegroom's there, you don't fast. You wait till he's gone. There are times of fasting, times of feasting, right? Okay.
To everything there is a purpose.
That's right.
He's pointing out to a nugget of, I don't know what the word is, God, he's Jesus or something. You know, that to me says, I am Messiah. I am the bridegroom and they're with me. There's more important.
I mean, then it could
I
be,
don't know, but to me, it always like represented Jesus is real. We don't need to do that. I don't know how to say it. This is very confusing, but
well, then
Jesus.
what I would say is just keep sticking to this level and let the other come, not other way around. So what we know is, yes, he's implying he's the bridegroom, but it stands on its own, right? The analogy is, of course, you don't go to a wedding and fast. You eat the amazing food. Remember, in John, what's the first miracle is Cana, is the water to wine at a wedding. It's a big deal. You celebrate things. So he's saying you don't fast in a season of feasting. You wait till it's the right season to fast. But then he goes, and remember I said I thought it was key, and this was again the first time I recognized this idea that, all right, John's part of the past. Pharisees, he links together with John, part of the past system. We already saw their notions of being with clean or unclean were not Jesus's. He had a very different take on it. And now you have this next metaphor. I don't know what it's. What's this called when you have whatever. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears away.
What does that have to do with it?
Well, so he's saying that's great. So we have, you know what that is, right? Even I, with very little experience in anything making clothing wise, old clothes have done their shrinking already. There's no shrink left in them. But a new garment has to shrink. You put it on without having pre-shrunk it, it shrinks the first time you wash it, and then it rips away where you
So
sewed it.
Jesus is the unshrunk cloth and the old garment is the
Don't go there. Don't go there yet. Sort of. You just want to get the picture, and then he says, if the patch tears away from it, if he does, the patch tears away, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. It does more. It creates more of a problem, and no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Why? Why? Wine ferments. When it ferments, it emits gas. Gas expands it. So you have these like goat skin, wine things, but wine skins. You've seen them, right? Well, as it expands, the goat skin, which is leather, which is malleable, goes with it. Good. You empty that out. If you put new wine that still is that now needs to ferment, you fill it up like you did before, only there's no more room to stretch. It breaks. So very similar. Something that's old or has been used or has done the thing that needs to do in order for the new wine to be able to go into it or the patch be able to go on it. Once that's done, it's no good. And the wine's destroyed, and so are the skins. But new wine is for new wineskins. Okay. Why is he talking about this in response to fasting? I think this was, I get new and the old, but what I realized, he's basically, saying, the old system that they have built everything around and have wanted this Messiah to fit into is not, it's the old cloth. You cannot fit the new cloth into it. Now, they remained good Jews, but what they did was emphasize what was essentially, how do I say this? There were sort of two levels. What was the essential matter? What were the essential matters of obedience and loving God, and what were more surface? You see this more clearly. I am going to kind of break my own rule, but it should make more sense in Matthew and Luke, who both do like a Sermon on the Mount and a whole series. But after that, he says, you've heard it said, don't kill, don't murder. But I tell you, if you even get angry at someone, you've committed murder. Now, this is going to annoy them because they have the check mark next to do not murder. Got it. No murder today. But it's really hard. And he ups it by saying, and if you say you fool to someone, oh boy, there are some highways I drive on and I can't get very far without that. So he's equating that with murder. This is going to offend the righteous. Why? Because they can easily check the do not murder thing. But it's much harder to check the I haven't gotten angry at anybody. I haven't called him a fool. Now that's getting personal. And I think that, and he was saying it always was that way. You just reduced it to a checklist. I so often think that's what we do in church. I think that's why it's easy to judge, because we have determined what are the
Yes, ma'am.
acceptable sins. I have yet to hear a sermon on gossiping. And I tell you, there's far more gossip going on than murder. But that's, or coveting. Coveting's a top 10, wanting things that aren't yours. But you don't hear that much. Why? Because that's close to home. That's like a matter of my heart. Things I want, and it's not seen. Stealing's one thing. I could keep that, but coveting, that's another. And I think that Jesus is explaining the real definition of all these things. And if you try to have this Messiah, this Son of God, this new breaking forth, the new thing that John promised, right? And then ta-da, here it is. If you try to fit that into the old system, it's going to ruin. It'll ruin both. It will not submit to that.
It's interesting that John's disciples are fasting because obviously John still has followers who weren't following Jesus. There was, or
Yeah. So which part is funny? That they were fasting, or that there was a group of.
I'm interested in John the Baptist and his followers, and because he had such an incredible experience, and yet he continues teaching, and he continues having followers. At least it would indicate that, or else his followers were just doing it on their own. I don't know.
Right. Well, you're right. But either way, they're good Jews. They're living in the old system. Now, I don't want to make too much of it because I do think there's continuity. But experientially, on the ground, the way the Jews of the first century lived and experienced and believed, or how they understood their expression of faith, was not all that. It had flaws. And the flaws were precisely the pain point. If you think checking off murder, no, I didn't murder today, by that you've done your duty, you've missed something big, because it's more than that. And Jesus goes, explains this. It's you wash the outside of the cup, he said. Great, but the inside is all dirty. That's where the problem is. And so the old system, which seemed to be okay with just the outside, and honestly, there's something that does help quash sin when there's social stigma involved. There's something, it does keep people from doing things because they don't want to be the pariah. But it's like your husband coming in and saying, oh, February 14th, here you go. You got flowers. Why? Because it's February 14th.
Shaped box of chocolate.
Yeah. Where I told my ex, I don't ever want flowers or anything on Valentine's Day. Because you're supposed to, I don't want that. It'll mean much more any other time. I also didn't do much on ceremony, but I just remember that bothered me. Like, it's like such a routine. Don't do that. It'll mean more if it's spontaneous or some other time because it'll come from your heart. It's like that. You don't want, I love you. Why? Because I'm supposed to love you. Great. Don't you want a little more? So I think that there's this God, God has been looking for more. Jesus is trying to teach that there's more to it than that.
I think they were trying to do it on their own. There was no, as we know now, no real relationship. They were prideful I do this, this, and
Who,
this,
who was they? Like the Pharisees, you mean? Or
Yeah.
okay.
right? Cause I can follow all the rules, so I'm better.
They-
And I can judge like this one, like people do today, like that one's overweight, and they're like.
But there, in this case, yes.
You know what I mean? That
yes.
You follow everything, and then you got your neighbor
Well,
not cutting their lawn. You could be judgmental, and what God's been teaching me is to be humble.
Yeah.
And that expels that pride that we all have.
but
that we're better
what? Just
than
keep in
everybody,
mind,
so.
I'm not trying to. Jesus does a good enough job saying, you worry about things that are much smaller, and you don't worry about things. But what you do have though, the Pharisees have is they know what the rules are. So they're not just randomly or arbitrarily judging neighbors. They're right. They didn't tithe their little mint, and you saw the mint grow. There should have been much more in that tithe than they put in. So they're judging rightly in that sense.
Are you supposed to judge people back then?
Well,
This is the old system.
Right, the old system.
I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I'm simply saying it wasn't as if you could accuse them of. I think, in fact, the bigger issue wasn't the judging. The bigger issue was thinking they had it all under control.
Their own power.
Right, but they thought they spoke for God, that their judgments were from God because they limited God's
Yeah.
what God expected of them to checkable lists. And that is so simple to do, and we do it. I guarantee every one of us in here does it somewhere in our lives.
It's easier. It's easier.
Uh-huh.
It's easier than every day just surrendering to myself, to the Lord. And, would I walk away from my lucrative job and follow Jesus?
Yeah.
Even though I say I would
Yep.
I give up my social security check? Would I give up living in this beautiful house? Would I
Right.
head off to Africa or, the war or wherever? I don't know. I can't say that. So
Right.
I think it's, you have to have that spirit of God really compelling you, which I don't know in the old system, the Jewish system.
Yeah,
They
because
didn't.
we love our stuff.
I know.
Well,
I
we
do.
love everything.
There are all sorts of flavors of sin. How's that?
Yeah.
Because, the Pharisee would have been the husband who showed up on time at dinner, didn't have a gumata. He was, if they're checking the lists, they're the nice guys, right? But that doesn't mean that they're kind or they're generous or they care much about other people, etc. That's the difference. And then there are people who are, again, jumping ahead to another passage. You remember when Mary anoints Jesus' feet with her tears or wants to do it with a perfume? He gives her credit, not because the rest of her life is all, tied up in a bow, but because she did love him in that way. So we have our flavors of sin, and what we really like to do is keep our sins in the quiet and the down low. And it's much easier to look at those sins of others, which we don't struggle with. And in many cases, we don't. There are sins I can take no credit for things that don't tempt, if I do them, and it's the right thing to do, if I'm not tempted to do the wrong thing. That just means I'm doing what I want, right? Does that make sense? I said too many things otherwise. Yeah. So there's no merit. I get no merit badge for accomplishing that thing because I did what I wanted. It wasn't. But the thing that I struggle with, if I do it anyway, and it's really hard for me, there's some credit there. But anyway, all that to say, just be aware that of course, they're human, so they did judge. But they had good reason to judge because they were thinking they were right on this. And what he's saying is you miss some things, and they're important because you're trying to fit in what will be the Holy Spirit coming. And this new movement, it's a new age. We hear this. And it won't fit into this system. The system, I think, was designed for a couple of reasons. That's a huge, long discussion. But for now, let's just stop here. I can't believe we didn't get through all three of them. But it's similar, the last one. And we'll keep going next time.
That's interesting.
So any remaining questions on those two sections we read? So many, write them down.
We'll never get through this.